A big thanks to all our sponsors: Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website skipsandbins.com, easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. A big thanks to Mr. Vicky's sauces. They are handmade in Cumbria. If you want to order some of these sauces, call 01768 210 102 or go to the website mrvickys.co.uk. Thanks again to United Group Travel. They are a UK coach holiday firm and they are based in Morpeth with pickups throughout the northeast. No strangers on our tours, just people you haven't met yet. They're on Facebook. They've also got a website, unitedgrouptravel.com, or give them a call, 01670 632 460 or 0791 666 4174 or 07957 141 654. Big thanks to Darren Baldwin Funerals. They're an independent funeral director based in Gateshead. You can find them at their website, darrenbaldwinfunerals.co.uk, or give them a call, 0191 478 2730, or email Darren at darrenbaldwinfunerals.co.uk. Big thanks to Neil and the lads at Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And a big thank you to New Workwear. You can find them at newworkwear.com. If you want to help the channel, then please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button underneath today's video. Hit the thumb up, which helps you like the video, and please click share and share it to your other social media. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast providers. If you want to help the channel, you could take out a one-off membership. You get a cup, a pen, a membership card, and a scarf. It's a £25 one-off fee, and you can go to nufcmatters.com and click membership, or put your smartphone over this QR code, and it will take you straight there. We also help the food bank on this channel. If you want to help the food bank virtually from wherever you are in the world, click on nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and it takes you to the matchday bucket and you can make a donation no matter how big or small. I'm also involved in the Northeast Footy Breakfast Show. You can find us on the toonuk.com. I do Monday to Friday with Ted, the Sunderland fan, and Rye, the Borough fan, and Radio Dad Dave. Lots of fun, 7 till 9 every morning. Give us a listen, you'll not regret it. We also help support people in the area who are putting events on. An evening with Nobby Solano takes place on the 19th of January at the Tyneside Irish Club. And an evening with Peter Beardsley takes place at the Tyneside Irish Centre the week before, on January the 12th. Tickets for both events are available on Voucher and would make fantastic Christmas presents for anyone of a black and white persuasion. We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.
Attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again, but it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you.
Good morning, all. Welcome to nufc Matters with me, Steve Wraith. Eddie Howe's press conference review and a bit of a Wraith review this morning. I am going to do a few Q&A question sessions on these programmes moving forward until the end of the season. So anyone's got any burning questions, football related, that want me to answer, because as the host, I tend not to get much of an opinion on this platform. But if you've got any questions for me, always happy to have a bit crack on a Saturday morning when I can. Okay. Eddie Howe's press conference. No Matthew Raisbeck. Not sure where he was yesterday, but Keith Downey started off the press conference yesterday and asked Eddie Howe, how he was recovering physically and mentally from the exertions on Tuesday night in Paris. He said, "I'm good physically, and I'm good to go." He says, mentally, there's been a lot of disappointment in the dressing room with the boys, but the following day, it's a new day, and you've got to look forward. You don't look back, and that's probably the Eddie Howe that we all know. So no change there. Some players, I guess, are good at moving on. And is that the kind of thing you target when you go out and sign a player? Said Keith. And again, he says it's important. He says, I don't like any players allowing a result to linger. He says, of course, you can allow players to be emotional, but we don't want to view ourselves as victims from that situation on Tuesday night. He says, but we will certainly use it as motivation. Keith then used the phrase battening down the hatches, which he said, is that very much the case? What Newcastle United do and what your team does and what you do. He said, it's one way of putting it, but I'm not sure that is what we do. He says, we've got a problem with injuries at the moment, as we all know. It's been well publicised, but ultimately we can get a good team out there on the pitch. At this moment in time, we've got young players who are coming in and performing and doing well. But yeah, battening down the hatches, he guesses that it's a terminology which he's used to, and I guess they've just got to get on with it. That was what Eddie's message was. We've got injuries, pointless moaning about it. We've just got to get on with it. Which led Keita asking him if there was any new injuries. He said, I hope we're okay till kick-off. So no new injuries up until the point of yesterday. Obviously, they will have had a training session of some sort yesterday. So, hopefully no new injuries yesterday. Are there any players back? Said Keith. Not presently, said Eddie. Any updates on Sven Botman? That's the one that seems to have caused most of us a lot of concern, because we thought he was only going to be out for a short period, yet here we are weeks later and still no Sven Botman. Wasn't good news, I'm afraid. He said he's not training with us. He's building his load. We don't want to hit his knee with too much. So that goes, that flies in the face of the reports that were flying around social media the other day about Sven Botman back and training on grass. So I guess we don't read too much into what's put on social media. Is the advice you've got to give to each other. Harvey Barnes, he asked about. He's not trained with us yet. That again, for me, is a bit disappointing, because there was suggestions that Harvey Barnes would be coming back sooner rather than later, and yet here we are going into December now, not sure when he's going to come back. Not training with the first team yet, so that again is disappointment. He then asked about Willock and Longstaff. He said that he hoped those two players weren't long-term. But he says because the fixtures are coming thick and fast over the next 2 to 3 weeks, it's a blow to us losing those two players, especially the form that Longstaff was in. It is as well. Got to concur with them there. Are you doing anything different? Are you wrapping players in cotton wool? The ones who are available and fit to play. Eddie just said there's no chance to do that. As always, we've just got to go at it game to game, play the game, then give the players a chance for recovery, then give them information about the next game that's coming up, and then move on to the next game. So, we're not doing anything different. We're certainly not wrapping anybody in cotton wool. We've just got to hope that we don't get any more injuries, was the message that Eddie gave yesterday. Keith then went on to sin bins. Obviously, the conversation is something we've discussed on nufc Matters, and I've discussed it on the Northeast Football Breakfast Show on Tyne Radio this week. Sin bins potentially coming in. Eddie didn't swerve these kind of questions yesterday, which I was quite pleased about. He just said, I've not really read much about it. But I've got the same initial thoughts to it as I had with VAR, which was that I'll reserve judgment. And obviously, from his perspective, I think he knew he was going to get asked about VAR a little bit later in this press conference, so sets that one up nicely. That was Keith's questions over. Andy Sixsmith was next. He wished him a happy birthday or a belated happy birthday and asked him how he celebrated. Eddie laughed, thanked him, and said, "Cup of tea and some nice cake, very nice cake actually." He says, "Presents, of course." He said, "But it was low key." He says, "And I enjoyed it once I remembered what day it was." I mean, he gives that impression he's throwing so much time into Newcastle that he forgot his own birthday. I mean, that tells you the measure of the man. Andy then joked about the guy who tweeted that he'd switched his Christmas lights off after the result in France because even they were making him feel sad. Andy said, "Is it the saddest that you felt for a while after a game?" And he said, "I didn't feel sad for myself." He said, "I felt sad for everyone connected with the club. I felt sorry for the players. I felt sorry for the people who own the club, and I felt sorry for the fans who travelled out there." He said, "We didn't deserve to win the game from the football side of things, but to come so close to winning the game and being denied the way that we were denied was disappointing. But we have to have perspective. We've got 4 points off PSG. I think that's what he was implying. And, we've got to move quickly into the next game and put that experience behind us." Andy then asked him about the positives. He said, "I guess you can take some positives from Lewis Miley and how he's developing, and in this situation, he's got the opportunity to get into the first team at the age of 17 years of age. He's holding his own in the Premier League and the Champions League now, and the future will be the judge of that for Lewis Miley," is what Eddie said, keeping his feet on the ground, certainly. He said he can take things in his stride. He's got a really good perspective on life. He's polite, he's respectful, and he's keen to show his qualities. So, all the signs of a great manager, Eddie, every time he speaks for me. But the fact that he can see that Lewis is doing well, but he doesn't want him to get carried away, I guess, and he's going to keep his feet on the ground. And that's the right way to manage the kid, because he is world class at this moment in time. He's proven it. He can play on the big stage. And if I've always said, if you're good enough, you're old enough. Same starting 11 for the last two games. How do you manage that situation was Andy's next question. By trying not to pick up new injuries was what Eddie said. He said, with this team, we've got to rest players first and foremost correctly in between games, give them the information for the next game, and then we've got to hope as well that we start getting players back out of the injury room. So that's how you manage it, he said. He said, "I'm pleased to say that after the win against Chelsea and the draw in Paris, that there's no fatigue, certainly not mentally or physically. And in the dressing room, it's all very, very positive." So that's great to hear going into this game against Manchester United today. Manchester United was what Andy moved on to. He said they've won 5 out of the last 6 games. How do you view their progress and how they have turned the form around over the last few weeks? He said, "Look, you can never write off Manchester United. They've got great players. They've got a great coach. You've heard this before, haven't you? With every single game we've played this season, he never dismisses or puts down the opposition." He said he's got total respect for Ten Hag. And he says, yes, they've won a lot of games recently. He said, "I actually watched the Galatasaray game, and he said it was a great game. And I just want to say well done to both teams." And from his perspective, he was delighted that Ten Hag's delighted, obviously, that his team's doing well, but he thinks this is going to be a really good game. He's delighted that they're playing them at this time. 2 good teams going into form. Off the form book, it should be a real good cracker of a game tonight. What makes a good rivalry, said Andy, because he was pointing to the fact that Newcastle and Manchester United have this rivalry, and he said, look, really good competition brings rivalry. He said when games are close between 2 teams, that brings rivalry. He says, of course, in the 1990s, this particular fixture had its own reasons for being a rivalry, and that's because, you had the title to play for. Newcastle and Manchester United, Newcastle United and Manchester United were both going for the title. And he said those kind of fixtures bring energy from the stadium. They bring the atmosphere. And he says we need to be able to use that to our advantage tomorrow. That was Andy's questions over. Jerry Jackson was next, who I think was working for the BBC yesterday. And he started the questions on VAR. He said the VAR official who was in charge at involved with the PSG game was stood down. What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on VAR? He basically went on about the handball law. He said the handball law is vague. It's not clear. And that is the big problem. I would struggle to tell you what can be allowed and what can't be allowed with regards to the handball rule. He said ultimately the referee on the pitch made the right decision. VAR told him to look at it because they clearly thought it wasn't the right decision. But he just said, how really is the ref going to the screen? How is that going to benefit the referee if you're only showing them, certain angles? And he was right. He said what we've all said this week. He went, there's not enough power to the on-field official. And he says the decision that the on-field official, the referee, gave was correct. And he says, I believe that they should be given more strength and given more power. So Eddie really agreeing with all of us. Again, he just felt that it was pointless talking about it, but at least he gave an opinion. Are you seeking more guidance? Was the next question from Jerry. He said, well, we've asked for clarity. He says, but the moment's gone for us. He says every football fan sees that as an error, except PSG fans, of course. So, he said, I guess he knows that the club are going to appeal and look at the situation, but what good does it do? You've just got to park it, move on, and, hope that things get changed at the top level, I guess. You've only conceded 1 goal at home since Liverpool. What's the mood like, within the squad because of that? Eddie just said, look, he said it's we've set up differently in different games, depending on the opposition. He says, our principles haven't changed. The mood is good, but we're expecting a good performance against Manchester United, a committed performance against Manchester United, and that's from the back all the way to the front. Chris Conway was next, and can you and the players use the injustice of Tuesday night to motivate yourselves? Again, similar question to what had been asked previous, and he just said, look, it's what we have to try and do. He says if it helps certain players, then it helps certain players. He says, but this is a different game, it's a different day, it's a different competition. He says, but I like that kind of mentality. He says that's been my mentality for as a player and as a manager, and it certainly won't change. But some players can work with that and motivate themselves, and others use other methods. He then talked about Ten Hag manager's comments on the documentary he was talking about, Amazon Prime's documentary, We Are United. And he said, you pointing to the fact, I guess, that he did that team talk in the dressing room, and he used Ten Hag's comments to motivate the team, and more or less, they went out and got a wonderful win last season at home. Do you still use that kind of thing as a tool? Was the question from Chris Conway. He said that's games in the past. He said we played them, we got the result. He says we look at the future. He says we're a different team to a degree. We're playing a different team. It's a different situation, and we will act accordingly. We'll do what we feel is right in the dressing room to motivate the team to get the result. You both played midweek in the Champions League. Will fatigue play its part in this game? Eddie said no. I don't look at it that way at all. He says we both had enough time to recover and prepare in the same way. Dean was next. Not sure who Dean is, but he said, have you looked for clarity from UEFA on the VAR situation? I mean, it had already been answered in a roundabout way before, but he said, not me personally, but I believe the club have on the penalty situation. He then asked him if he, do you ever get angry? He says, you seemed so controlled after that situation. He says, oh, I get angry. He says, but who do I get angry with in that situation? The referee? No. VAR? Yes, but obviously you can't see them. You can't speak to them. And I think it's a waste of energy because the decision's made and the moment's gone. So, for me, that energy can be used in other ways. Dean then asked him if he felt that recent results against Manchester United in the league and in the Carabao Cup, have you closed the gap on Manchester United now? And Eddie wouldn't say that they've closed the gap. It's still the team that Newcastle have never finished above in the Premier League since its inception. But he basically said that's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to get to the top. We're trying to close the gap on the top teams, and we'll continue to do that as long as I'm here. Craig was next. He started on goalkeepers. He says Onana and Pope. He says they're both different types of keepers. He says we've seen Onana have a couple of mistakes midweek, and is it just simply that a good goalkeeper needs to be able to save shots? I could see where Craig was going with this particular, question, comparison to the two keepers. And he just said, look, some of Nick Pope's saves have been unbelievable this season, and I can only speak about him. I can't speak about another club's goalkeeper. He says the save against Chelsea last week was, in my view, underestimated. He says this has been a tough time for the squad and the football club with the injuries, but he is one of those players that has stepped up and shown his worth. Craig then decided to have a question about Nick Pope's kicking. Is he making up for that with his shot stopping? Because there's been a criticism of Nick Pope's kicking. People say that it's poor compared to other keepers we've had in the past. Again, Eddie just played the straight bat. He said, look, Nick Pope's character is undeniable in the goal. I want to praise the whole goalkeeping department because I think they're doing very well. I think Nick's kicking has improved this year, so he did answer the question about kicking, but that was as much as he let on. Craig then asked, is it very much a case of telling your team to shoot on sight at Onana's goal? Still trying to get him to have a pop at Onana, and he just laughed and went, I always encourage players to shoot. He says, and I analyse the team. I don't just analyse one player. Well done, Eddie. Chris Waff was next, and he was looking at VAR again, asking, could you suggest any positive changes for VAR? And he again just reiterated what he said earlier. If the ref makes a decision, I'd like the ref to look from his perspective. It's pointless looking at a screen. Please be strong enough to stand by your decision and your conviction. If you think that's not a penalty, then tell them it's not a penalty. I mean, ultimately, he'd done that previously in the game. Then Chris mentioned that, Eddie mentioned, that only minimal times has the ref backed his call. I mean, we look back to Michael Oliver, don't we? He was one of the first to do it, and there was a big hoo-ha about that. You would have thought other referees would have followed his lead, but sure, they didn't. Chris asked him about Mbappe, who said that Newcastle offered nothing. He just basically said, look, we don't seek validation of our performances from anyone other than our fans and, our owners. What other people think about Newcastle's performance has no relevance to me, which I thought was a great answer. Dominic was next. He asked again about other players. Elliot Anderson, he was asking about him. How's he doing? Again, disappointing news for me. This really just said he's working behind the scenes. He's having a scan today, but it was still 12 weeks he was expected to be out. I mean, such an innocuous injury, and you think of how much football Elliot Anderson would have got in this period of time. Got to be frustrating for the lad. Certainly frustrating for us as Newcastle fans. Positives he asked for. That was the next question. What's the positives over the last couple of weeks? And positives are that other players can step in and take their opportunities, such as Lewis Miley. And he's basically said that players like Lewis who have come in and took their opportunities, it's making the group stronger when these other players come back. God, Eddie Howe's got a job, hasn't he? When he's got a job and a half when all the players are fit. Miley was the next question. Sorry, from Dominic about loan spell, and obviously at the start of the season, Eddie didn't put him out on loan. What a shrewd move that's proved to be. But he basically said, could he still benefit from having a loan out of the club at some point? He said, well, look, I just felt it wasn't right to send him out on loan. I don't think some players develop more at a club and can be ready to go straight in. Others would benefit from going on loan. And he's always been close to that first team call up. So clearly Eddie knows a footballer when he sees one. And I can't see Lewis Miley going out on loan at any time now. Not at all. Luke was next. Luke's become a bit of a comical figure in here. And when I mean that, I don't mean people laugh at him. And what he asks, he softens Eddie up with a little with a little laughy comment at the start, and then moves on to a little bit more serious questions. But definitely changed his tact, Luke Edwards, I think, and he's better for it. He said, "Did you have tea and cake at the garden centre?" And everybody laughed because there's been this story about Eddie Howe going to the garden centre and having a cup of there. He'd been seen there. So Eddie laughed and just said, look, no, it wasn't. He says, I'm not sure where this has come from, Luke. He says, I went there once, though, and it was very nice, and I had a nice cup of tea. He then moved on to VAR, and he said, what do you think about the suggestion about free kicks, corners, and throw-ins being looked at with VAR now? He just said, look, he said, we need to get the main core of VAR right first. He went, offsides are okay. The lines are tight. He says, but the decision is black and white. And he said, ultimately, he says, I would like, to get that right first before we start looking at bringing in other things. And I don't think anybody would disagree with him then. He then was asking about, what other managers think of doing this in VAR, etc. And he says, I don't have discussions with managers about these kind of things. He says, but I would imagine that the players would feel the same. It's going to ruin the game if we bring in further changes to it when certainly things aren't going smoothly with VAR in its current inception. Luke then said, you must be delighted with the way that Tino Livramento has played at left back. He just said, look, he's doing really well. His mentality is good. He's played lots of different positions in this period, but he just gets his head down. He's unflustered, and I'm very, very pleased with the impact that he has had on this squad. And Luke then just spoke broadly about the coaching staff and the team, and you must be pleased with the way things are going so far. And he went, look, there's a long way to go. There's lots of work to go into what we want to achieve. There's lots of analysis going on at this moment in time. But yeah, I'd like to give them lots of credit. What's your plans for January? Said Luke. No further forward. We just got to wait until we see who comes back from injury, and then see if there's anyone available that we would like to bring in. But no further news on that. Kieran was next. Are you more frustrated now that the VAR officials have been stood down? No relevance to me, he said. I've got my opinion. It was wrong, the decision. I struggle to see how they came to that decision, but there's no relevance to us now. We've parked it and we've moved on. Sometimes clubs get an apology. Would that be beneficial? He said, well, it's not meaningless to get an apology. He says, it's a good thing to get an apology. He says, we all make mistakes. It's part of being a football manager or a football player. We can make mistakes. He says, me personally, I always say sorry if I get something wrong because I think it's important. Manchester United have said that it's the advantage to you, or Ten Hag has in his press conference. Eddie didn't get involved in a tete-a-tete with Ten Hag via the press. He just said, look, we've been in the same situation in our season. In fact, we're always at a disadvantage when we play a Premier League game, when we're playing somebody who hasn't been in Europe. That was it. He left it at that. Martin Hardy was next. He says, the us and them mentality, how have you developed that in your couple of years at Newcastle? He says, strategically, I haven't. He says, events have probably led to, that kind of reaction.
He said, but it's a powerful tool to bring the club together. And it's also a powerful tool to bring the team closer to the fans. And that's something I go on about on here time and time again. And you all know, guys and girls, when you go to the match, when there's a contentious decision offered against Newcastle, that's when we all get really wound up and off our feet. And you know, that's when it's at a really it's a nasty cauldron of, you know, simmering anger at an official. But the team on the opposition must really go, wow, that's 52,000 Geordies all having a go at you. It's not a pleasant experience for an away team. But that kind of us against them mentality is right, and you can see the players react to it, because every challenge for the next 2 minutes after that is greeted with a roar. So yeah, Eddie's right on that. Martin then was going on about, you know, he says, when we see the reactions on the pitch and the dressing room footage, you know, from your perspective, you know, that shows the camaraderie and that kind of thing and the fighting spirit. And he just goes, yeah, look, he says, we try to create the spirit because it is more powerful than everything. He says, we never had to fabricate anything. He said, it's all been natural. And, you know, it's us against them. We're fighting, you know, we're fighting for the black and white cause. He says, we're using all we can to get where we want to be. Are you pleased when you see other teams rattled? Eddie just said, who? And he just, you know, he was obviously referring to this Man United thing, trying to get a little byline from it. And he said, look, I'm not bothered about other clubs. He says, we respect all of our opponents on the pitch. He says, but we are determined to win and be successful. Keeping calm makes you unusual. Why do you act like that? Was Martin's next question. He went, well, it's not an act. He says, it's me. At certain times I am angry. He says, but I've always made a point of keeping my emotions to myself unless I need to bring them out for a positive reason. I guess we saw that in that Manchester United team talk, which he probably didn't realise. He knew the cameras were there, but he wouldn't have realised that was going to be used as part of the documentary. And that was, I guess, Eddie Howe showing that, you know, that bit of criticism from Ten Hag did affect him, and he used it to our advantage, and Newcastle came away with a 2-0 win. So yeah, it's a respect thing, clearly, from Eddie. He said, you gained praise for that, for not going mad, not going angry. Is that important? He says, I've had criticism for not doing it at certain times. He said, you know, I was told that if I, you know, didn't react in that kind of way, I'd never make it in the Premier League by somebody. He didn't say who, of course. He says, so I have had the flip side, and I have had it used against me negatively. So, interesting press conference, as always. Eddie Howe giving it his, giving us his best, as always, and it's great to hear from Eddie Howe in such a long, press conference. Another 30-odd minutes, and the fact that Newcastle do this now really does give me, gives me immense pleasure, because you get a full insight into what's going on, and you might not get all the questions answered, but you do get an insight into what's going on at the club. Okay, I'm happy to stay on for another half an hour. I'll go through the usual good mornings. Good morning, Les. I hope you're okay. Geordie Tune for life. I hope you're well. Barry Hogan. Hope you're okay. It is cold. -4. Good morning, David John Cook, he says. Sam is on as well. Blue Rhythm Boy. Good morning. What I'll do is I'll highlight the questions in the chat and come to you once I've got through the comments. I thought Eddie handled this week with total class, puts many to shame, says David. Hi, Steve. Hope you're okay. We're being linked by a lot of the gossip press is wanting to sign Romelu Lukaku. Wouldn't touch him with a barge pole. What about you? You know what? For me, I genuinely think that if you got somebody in on loan like Lukaku, not with the option to buy, but I think if we brought him in and said, look, it's going to help you, it's going to help us, 6 months, 5-6 month contract, come and help us win something. I think that would make sense. I wouldn't buy Lukaku for, anything. And I don't even know whether he would fit into the dressing room, but I think we need somebody else up front to get us over the line. So I'd rather have Lukaku than Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who'd spend more time in that injury on the hospital sickbed than he would playing games. Lukaku could get you 6 or 7 goals at the end of the season. But I have seen the story, Barry, so I wouldn't say no to it. But I think there's other options. It's like Ekitike. Ekitike is a good player. He's a good young player. Of course, he was going to go to PSG if they came waving the cash in a contract. But is it right to write him off now and say we don't want Ekitike because of that reason? Now he may be willing to come to the Premier League and might make it big. So Lukaku, I'll reserve judgment, but at the moment I wouldn't say no automatically. Blue Rhythm Boy, next question. He said, Steve, not footy related. I'd like to know what you thought of the latest Beatles song Now and Then. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really, really did. It's such a crying shame that this is the last Beatles song that we know can be released. I mean, look, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary to hear somebody somewhere has got a little suitcase in the loft with some wonderful tracks by John, Paul, Ringo, and George. But at the moment, they're saying there's nothing else. So I really liked it. I know some big Beatles fans who, can dissect it a lot better than I can. But they also enjoyed it. There's something for everyone in it. But just the technology that's allowed people to do that now. I think the big criticism from one of my friends was that it was put onto the those compilation albums, and he said it shouldn't be because it wasn't time sensitive. The date of the track and when it was written by Lennon and recorded by Lennon didn't fall into the category of the album that it's been re-released on. So he would have preferred it to have gone onto the anthology. I think there is some stuff on the anthology on the anthology releases which could be cleaned up to the same kind of level now, which is inaudible and you wouldn't sell individually. So maybe that's another avenue for them to go down. But yeah, I really liked it. The video was fantastic as well. Barry, Steve, Newcastle World stating we've approached UEFA for clarification over the loony PSG penalty decision. Is there any point? They're not going to give us an extra 2 points. I guess what Eddie says is, an apology is always a good thing. And I think that getting an apology from UEFA is all you're going to get. It's too late now. It could cost Newcastle millions of pounds in revenue, because getting through the last 16 creates a buzz, creates more ticket money, and also gives you that opportunity to get more TV money. So, and I guess you ranked higher universally as well. So for me, it's not going to get us anything, Barry. But it's protocol, I suppose. It's protocol. It's what people do in these situations, and Newcastle, I suppose, are just following protocol. Sin bins, David John Cook, would make injury issues that many clubs have had even worse. David John Cook. I agree. Sin bins. I'm not a fan. It's been a bit of a split on nufc matters and on the Northeast Footy Breakfast Show. Some people think they're a great idea. I think it'll slow the game down too much, and I think teams will go on the defensive. It's becoming more and more Americanized, and I don't like it. So I agree with that. How amazing our travelling fans after issues at Villa this week just shows how good our fan base are. Yeah, David, it became like it was a concern when you saw the PSG ultras walking around Paris looking for Newcastle fans, and certain individuals using social media to highlight where we are. Newcastle fans all in a bar are easy to find. I personally think that people should screw the loaf on a bit more and not be broadcasting where they are and why they're there. Do a video by all means for your YouTube channel, but stick it out when you've left the place. You don't need the added issue when you're abroad of a whole set of football hooligans coming down and chucking chairs and bottles and whatever else and flares at you. I just think they need to screw the loaf on a little bit. Go to the safe fan areas. NUSC sorted out a wonderful, 3 wonderful away trips for Newcastle fans. Safe areas, places where there were so many Newcastle fans that 20 hooligans wouldn't have bothered their backside. But you've just got to be careful. But I agree with you. The travelling fan base, we just go and party. It's like watching Scotland in the World Cup. Whenever Scotland qualify for the World Cup, they just go to party, and that's what Newcastle fans do. Credit to the club, credit to the area. And let's have some more. Good morning, John. There's a feeling that basically, as long as we turn up tonight, the points are ours. It may not be quite so easy, but on paper we should have the edge. I don't feel like that, John. I genuinely feel that Eddie's almost coaxing our supporters into that kind of mindset that it's us against them, but also that you have to have respect for your opposition. I've seen a few comments on social media, but I've gone into most cases in games this week where this season, where I've looked at it and gone, I can't see this team getting a win. I mean, we do predictions on this show every week, and so you guys know what my predictions have been. I've had quite a decent success rate, but ultimately with the diminishing players, I just haven't seen these results coming. And 4-1 against Chelsea, unbelievable. 3-0 against Manchester United in the Carabao Cup, unbelievable. I could go on, but PSG, 4 points off PSG with a team that we had out on Tuesday night to get a 1-1 draw in Paris when we should have won 1-0. Unbelievable. So I can understand why some people will get carried away with it, John. I can. David, I'm glad to see some of the nufc Matters crowd went up there. Morgan Marshall, who organised it, said it was an absolutely fantastic night. Supermax car got a puncture on the way up though, so they didn't get there at about 8:30, but they stayed late and they had a cracking night. Do you think Everton will be successful with their appeal, Steve? Hand on heart, no, because the Premier League very, very rarely go back on their original decision, and they seem very confident with their decision. They're also looking potentially, I've heard this week, at pushing for something else, which could see further points deducted. So the answer is no. I don't see that happening. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Chelsea and Manchester City, though. Certainly would be. In reality, Everton's overspend was 100 million more spent last 2 years, with EPL talking that down to possibly not. All right, okay. Yeah, I mean, they only went £19.5 million over, didn't they? Morning, Dougie. John Askew, is there a danger of some form of Franco-German alliance in Dortmund to finish off our Champions League hopes? I don't think so. I think Dortmund will want to finish top of the group, and I don't think there'll be any alliance at all. It's football, not politics, and I genuinely think that Dortmund will want to finish off PSG. You've got to remember as well, if PSG get through, that they could, on the day, they can be world class, and if PSG get through, Dortmund could end up playing them at some point again, and they'll not want that. Regardless of the appeal outcome, have Everton been lucky? If any punishment had been last season, they would probably been relegated. Not happy in this season. I think they've been unlucky, John. I think they've been unlucky. Had they sold to Tottenham for an extra 20 million, they wouldn't have been in this mess. Richarlison. And I just think they've been unlucky. I think 10 points is a harsh punishment for £19.5 million over the top. And I guess you're saying, well, how's that? Well, it's down to the allegations against some of the other teams. Let's face it, if Man City are found guilty, this is hypothetical. If Man City are found guilty of breaching financial fair play 115 times, let's just say they get found guilty of breaching it 10 times, and that 105 of those are found not to be true, but 10 of them are found guilty. What do you do with Man City? Chuck them in the non-league. That's what people will be saying. Or take 100 points. I don't know what you do. This is where things are going to become so tricky. I think they've been unlucky, but I think the teams that will benefit from this are the teams that are going to be punished further forward, because they've made a rod for their own back now. 10 points. That's the biggest amount, isn't it, that's been removed from a Premier League team. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think they've been unlucky, but I think they've been guilty because, well, they've admitted their guilt now. But they're appealing against the punishment. So we'll wait and see. Will Lewis Hall start tonight? Cracking prospect, in my opinion, and he could be vital in the weeks ahead. I think he'll go and change tonight, because he said yesterday that all of those players psychologically and mentally are fine, And as long as there's no injuries, I think he could go with the same team for 3 games in a row. But Lewis Hall will get a run out tonight at some point, I would imagine, and Matt Ritchie. Some journals, creative thinking and writing can make the real answer sound like a different press conference, in my opinion. It's why I decided to start doing this program, because I know everyone can listen to the press conference. Everybody can. Not all of you will know who the people are, and I can give a little bit of an extra edge to that because I know who most of these journalists are, having either met them or been interviewed by them at some point. But that's the whole point, and that's why I emphasize sometimes, well, such and such asked a question at the start, and oh, look, he's done that in the middle and he's done it at the end. They're trying to get that narrative of, you know, Eddie Howe says Ten Hag is this, and then they get a back page spread. It's the way journalism works. Or, you know, the question about the goalkeepers. Pope is better than Onana is another one that could have come out from that questioning by, you know, one of the journalists yesterday. So, yeah, creative journalism, creative thinking. It's been clever with the words. And, you know, for years, people who read a red top, we're all guilty of it. You read a headline and, you know, you might not read the story. And, oh, such and such has said this. Well, no, he didn't. This is the way he said it, and this is why he said it. And that's why this putting the press conference out by Newcastle is beneficial, I think. Yeah, John just answering the same question there. The way Elliot has bulked up in a short time, he may have caused damage to his back that was exposed by something insignificant. It's a good point. I'm no doctor. I wouldn't know at all, you know, if that would be the case, but he certainly did bulk up. I think it's just been a freak injury, though, sadly. Steve, my school pal, works with Hasty, driving high-end private cars. He drove someone to Paris this week. I don't think it was Keith and John, just as Alan, though. All right, okay, yeah. They had a great time in Paris. John's suffering a little bit from it, though. Will we be doing a Christmas song this year? It's not on the pipeline. We are doing a Christmas song on the Northeast Football Breakfast Show, which should be out, and I will be playing that on here. But we've not done one for any UFC matters this year, to be honest. Lots going on, Barry. If that I Love Sausage Rolls can top the charts, where could the NUFC Matters song end up? Oh, dear me, how? Please, no. Les says, Luke Edwards certainly has turned the page. He called Eddie arguably the best manager in England, irrespective of nationality. Shows in his questioning at the press conferences. I agree, Les. Definitely changed his tune because he was very, he was very different, wasn't he? In the build-up to the takeover, just after the takeover. There's nothing wrong with that. If you can change and change for the better, then you know that's great. Benzema on loan from the Saudi League. I've done a podcast with Ben Jacobs, which will go out on Tuesday. I get the impression that there's not going to be any action for Newcastle. Certainly not with respects to that. I asked him again about you know, the potential links to one or two players, Neves in particular. And yeah, I don't know. I think that was a red herring. But, you know, I guess we'll have to wait and see in January. Is there anyone close to coming back from injury? The answer is no, Tom. If you listen to Eddie's press conference, the answer is no in the short term. But in the long term, yes, obviously players will be coming back. But at the moment, Botman's is not training with the team. Harvey Barnes isn't training with the team. So they're still away. You know, they're still away from coming back in. He said that Longstaff and Willock would be a couple of weeks away, you know, which is still bad enough because they'll miss a load of fixtures. You know, I think, honestly, I think a lot of these players will be in and around the same dates towards Christmas and just after New Year. I think there'll be a few back for the Carabao Cup game, which will set us up nicely against Chelsea. I think we'll have a stronger team when we come up against Chelsea in the Carabao Cup. John can't see Lukaku, but for a few months possibly. Yeah, not as a permanent deal, John. Not as a permanent deal. My pal Bob Smeaton directed the anthology. He was really pleased with the new Beatles song. All right, good stuff. Yeah, there's a couple of people from the Northeast did a lot of work on the anthology, and they did a cracking job of it as well. What position do we need to be in the league come start of January to be in a good position for a top 4 place? Anywhere in the top 8 would, Sam, to be honest. I mean, you want to be as high up as possible, don't you? But anything from 8th upwards has got a chance in January of making a late run in the spring, you know, to get the Champions League place. But, you know, if we're going into the new year sitting in 6th, I'll be happy because gives you plenty time, to turn things around. That's where I would say anyway. Still thick as snow, mate. No further snow today. I mean, for me personally, looking at the old weather forecast, let's hold on. Never done a weather forecast on NFC Matters. There is a first time for everything. So I will pick up my phone and I will do it live for you, Dave. Cloudy conditions from 11 till 6, with flurries expected at 6. So it's going to start snowing at 6 o'clock. And then the rest of the night is going to be -1 and -2, and no snow after 6 o'clock. So 20% chance of snow at 6 o'clock. And then the rest of the night is unblemished. So there we go. I didn't use any technical terms there for you. Will England win a tournament with Jude Bellingham in the middle? Yes, but not with Southgate as manager. For me, I think we need a new manager, not Eddie Howe. I still think Potter will get it, but he keeps knocking jobs back left, right, and centre. But I think if Gareth Southgate's in charge, I don't think we'll see the best of Bellingham. I don't think he's the right man for the job. You need somebody like El Tel, don't you? God bless him, to come in and shake things up a little bit. Potter could be very much the same as Southgate, but I've just got a feeling he's just waiting for that job. But who knows? Ian's got a feeling that we're going to smash Manchester United. I hope you're right, mate. I hope you're right. We've been here before. Southgate's just too negative, even with Bellingham. I agree. Just what I've said, Ian. 100%, mate. Southgate lacks imagination and ambition. We are winning nothing with him. He's been a great manager. A great English manager. There's no doubt about it. But, everybody goes stale. Everybody goes stale. Everyone has those moments where they go, they've reached the level. And I think now is it. I mean, the whole Sterling thing is bizarre. If you're not going to pick England, if you're not going to pick Sterling for England now, tell him his England career's over. Don't keep the kid hanging on a hope that that he's going to be, he's going to potentially be there. It's not fair on the player unless he's had a private conversation with him and said, I'm taking you next season. I've seen enough. I need to see these other players. But I don't get that view. I don't get that impression from him. We need to try and win the Carabao Cup. How are you, the lads? Yeah, Blue Rhythm Boy, I agree. We've got a good run coming up when we will be getting close to full strength again after the next few games. I agree. And January, we should have a full house, and that's when Eddie's got some major headaches, some good headaches to have, but some major headaches. Cheers, Steve. Big coat weather than yes, Dave. 100%, mate. 100%. Don't forget Supermac and Gibbo, by the way. If anybody is coming to the match today, will be at Louis' Liquor Store at 5:45. They're doing pre-match only. It's free entry. Children are welcome, and it's the food is by Fed's Fried Chicken. I tell you what, that fried chicken is absolutely gorgeous in there. But the bar's lovely. It reminds me of the bar on Cheers, actually. But yeah, Louis' Liquor Store. It's in the Groat Market, the street opposite the big market. So get yourself along there if you want to see Malcolm and Gibbo. They're always good crack, but always good opportunity as well to get a photograph with them and meet the lads, get something signed as well, program or something like that. Bellingham and Miley, canny midfield. You're not wrong, Sam. And I think we've got a great chance of getting to the final of the Carabao Cup. Me too. Really, really do. A wonderful comment by Stuart Pearce yesterday, speaking about the Beckham Simeone incident. If you kick out, do a proper job. What a defender. I can just hear Pearce saying that. I did a talking with him once. What a lovely bloke. Mike Stewart, 2-1 today. I hope so, mate. And Blue Rhythm Boy, I believe we will win a trophy with Eddie Howe in charge. That's a lovely way to finish the show. I hope you've enjoyed it. I will endeavour to try and do a few more Q&As at the end of Eddie Howe's press conference. I think it's a nicer way of doing it. And good to see everybody. Don't forget as well, if you haven't listened to it, the Northeast Footy Brekkie Show. If you search and bookmark the nufctoontalk.com, that's the website. There's a little widget which you can press play on every morning. I'm on there 7 till 9. Now, it's good banter because you've got Ted the Mackham and you've got Rye, the mad Australian who supports Borough. But it's just good crack, 7 till 9. So if you're sick of listening about what's going on around you in the world and depressing yourself, get yourself onto there. They also do a Three Legends show. Lee Clark represents Newcastle on a Friday night, and Ian Murtagh does a journalist show on the same night on the same channel. So it's worth looking at, even if you don't want to listen to 2 hours of me and a Mackham and a Borough fan rabbiting on in the morning. But just bookmark that, thetooneuk.com. It's well worth a listen. If you haven't listened to it, please give it a try. And also, the Beardsley event and the Keegan Waddle Beardsley event are both sold out now. But this event is still available on voucher. So if you want to treat yourself, or you're thinking, if people are saying, what can I get you for Christmas? Is there anything you want? Get yourself on a voucher. So the tickets aren't £55 on voucher. The tickets are about 20 quid on voucher for the Nobby Solano do. There's 150 tickets went on sale. Voucher have sold 50, I think. I think we've sold 10. So obviously from your perspective, guys, if you want to go to that event, get yourself on a voucher. Well worth going. Looking forward to seeing as many of you as possible. And if anybody is going to the Irish Centre on Thursday, that's going to be like the nufc Matters Christmas party. And Frank Clark and Gibbo are going to do pre-match, half-time, and then do a little talk in a post-match. So there's still tickets available for that. Again, get yourself onto voucher. Just look for Frank Clark. So get yourself along to that if you can. Great chat. Thanks, David. Thanks, Les. Thanks, Ian. How are the lads? No problems, Blue Rhythm Boy. And that shirt doesn't fit Waternobby. Great to see you all, guys. Enjoy the game. Stay safe in the snow. I'll be back tomorrow morning to look back at the Manchester United game with Stu Penman and Neil Mitchell on the Professionals. Take care, guys.